Meeting to order. Mike, roll call.
Carter.
Here.
Bertels.
Present.
Engels.
Here.
Dubravik.
Here.
Heel. Okay. We do have a quorum.
Oh, here for Snyder.
Oh, did I said your name, didn't I?
It's okay.
Didn't I say your name?
I didn't hear it.
Oh, okay.
Next item, approval of the agenda for this evening, August 23rd, 2018. Do I have a motion to approve? A motion?
Motion to approve.
Second?
Support.
And did you want to do a roll call on this, Mike, as well?
I don't need to on this.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Next item, public comments, except for comments on public hearings and work applications. Any public comments? Next item on the agenda, approval of the July 9th, 2018 meeting minutes. Do I have a motion to approve?
I'll motion to approve.
Second?
Support.
All in favor?
Aye.
Public hearings, there are none. The next item on the agenda is new business, and the first item under that category is a work application we have for replacing asphalt shingles at 401 East Harris Street with a metal roof. And let me just start out with respect to this application. The applicant is Tom Pearson, and Tom is not just my neighbor, he's essentially in my backyard. And the property that is the subject of the application is just 2 doors down from us. And quite frankly, I feel conflicted because I like the project. I like the roof. I like the fact that you're replacing it. And quite frankly, I prefer metal over asphalt. But the point I'm trying to make is that I do feel a bias in favor of your project because of my proximity and related issues. So I'm actually going to recuse myself from voting on this project because I do feel I have an inappropriate bias in favor of it. So with that said, I am going to turn it over to Mike to give a discussion of the project and to the extent the property owner wants to talk about it. And then the next person in line, I think, should handle the...
It would be Mark.
Should handle the
Mark is the
discussion and the
secretary
voting.
of this commission.
Okay.
Okay, sure. Well, I'll give you a little bit of information on this. The photo that's up here right now, I'm not sure how old it is. I'm assuming it's at least 10 years old. He can tell you when the house was painted and updated there. Personally, I really like that color, green and white, you know. But anyway, Tom had came into City Hall to get a building permit to re-roof his home. And in reviewing it, Cindy Cornell, who puts together the information to make sure everything is there for AGS Professional Services, who does our building inspections, Cindy was the one who looked at the address and said, Mike, isn't that in the historic district? And I said, yes. So she got a hold of Tom. He came in, and as you can see, you know, the old asphalt shingles are already off. And the timing of this special meeting was actually very, very good because I think it was it Monday of this week you came in?
Yes.
And he's like, Mike, is there any way they can hear this ASAP? And I said, well, we are having a special meeting Thursday. So that's kind of the time frame on all of this. It's pretty obvious from the picture that material has already been purchased. And essentially, this is what he's hoping, you know, to do with the roof. It is a contributing site. And in your packet, of course, is the report from the Michigan Historic Preservation Office, their survey, I should call it, not a report. And also in here, and I added 2 things at the last minute. One was a copy of locations in the historic district where there currently are metal roofs, or in the area, not just the historic district. There are quite a few in the immediate area that are not in the historic district. So with that, he also gave some information on the specific material he wishes to use. And I guess from there, I'm going to let Tom talk for just a minute and explain what he can and whatever questions you may have for him or myself. But that's where the timing of this comes. Tom does work on other projects in town. He comes in, he gets building permits. He does all the stuff you're supposed to do, but this one kind of had the skids put on it when Cindy noticed that it was in the historic district. Tom, is there anything you'd like to say? Just please stand up and
Sure,
write your name down.
All right. First, I want to work in cooperation with this commission, of course, and it's unfortunate the material is purchased. That house was painted in 2012, and I know that there were members on this board that wanted me to paint it sooner than what it got painted, but there were other priorities on buildings. But painted in 2012, the shingles were in bad shape, got them off, and I really wanted to get, and I had kind of forgotten that it really was in the historic district, quite frankly, and I hadn't thought about that. And I purchased the material, and it's sitting in my yard. Why metal? Why not? But I realized that looking at your guidelines, especially with roofing, that you attempt to retain and preserve the existing historic roofing material. Whenever possible, retention of historic roofing material such as metal, slate, or wood shingle is encouraged. Now, I'm not going to tell you that one up there had metal on it, because it did. If it did, it'd probably still be on it. That's how good I think metal. I have a metal roof on mine, and put it on 8 years ago. It's great, you know. And there's some myths about it, you know, with rusting and all that, but it's guaranteed. The paint is what they guarantee on a steel roof. It's not the metal; it's the paint. This would be a raised seam. A raised seam, you cover your the panhead screws that you use to secure it. So essentially, you know, you protect what is affixed to the roof with. I just know that I really like mine. They're low maintenance. You don't really have to touch them. I mean, I don't know if your position as a body is you can't replace shingles, asphalt shingles with steel, then I guess the handwriting is pretty much on the wall. I would hope that you might want to consider allowing steel. I have a granddaughter who just celebrated her first birthday. If there were steel on that roof, she probably wouldn't ever have to worry about it in her lifetime, you know, as far as maintenance. But metal roofs are cooler, as you can see in the material. They're durable, they're lighter, and I guess it depends on how rigid or how firm your stand is on replacing what was there, because there wasn't metal on it. It was shingles, and there were 3 layers on the lower roof, and there was only 1 layer on the upper roof. So I know that must have gone back a ways. This is a company, a Michigan company. It's out of Bay City that the steel came from. So supporting Michigan business.
What's happening at the eaves, at the drip line? Are you doing anything to the fascia, or is it just the roof?
No, it's just the roof. There's synthetic felt on it, right? And synthetic felt is the barrier between the wood and the metal. So, did that on mine, no problem, 0. There's no problem. The only thing with a metal roof is you want to put those diffractors on them, because you can get some pretty big chunks of ice coming down on those. The particular one I have is called striated. Has little. It wasn't accurate in the packet, the one that I gave you. I actually have aluminum 2 striated. Let's see. I think I have a picture of it. Yes. It would be, I don't have a copy. It'd be the first one on there. Okay? It's the first one on there. It has it's striated on there, so there's like, it looks like there's little panels on there. Oh yeah, you got it.
This one? Okay.
And, yeah.
The top one?
The top one. And they do that to kind of keep it from what they call oil canning, you know, to where it looks like it's dented. So that's one of the reasons why you use striated. So I'm hoping that this would be approved. Been praying about it for sure. But you know, it's really in your hands. And the color that I chose was native copper. So a greenhouse with a copper roof, I thought would be outstanding. I mean, I thought it would have great curb appeal, and I didn't think about asphalt being replaced with asphalt. I kind of thought if I ever replaced that roof, I was always thinking metal, because metal just lasts a long time. It's very durable, and you just don't have to, it's very low maintenance.
I'm curious about the bay windows, small as that is. How would that also be?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Just so we'd have to.
There's you can see over the bay window,
like
you can see the entrance to the right of the bay window.
Yes.
That would also have it on it. And then there's, and you can see it in there too, there's an entrance to 401.5, which is the upstairs apartment. There's just a little, I don't think they call it gable, but it's just a little peak, a triangle like this. That would also be covered. And then on the far end, which would be as we look at it, we're looking at it west, okay? So if you go left, that would be on the north. On the north end, there's a hip roof. It's over the entrance of 401B, and that's a hip roof. That also, so all that would be covered.
Okay, and I'm just curious on that, the bay window, are there actually like 3 planes, like 3?
Yes.
Okay, and is it narrow? Like I see it's kind of wide, in this drawing here, I mean, where the planes kind of come together. Do they have narrower sections like for smaller areas like that?
No. No, they would be, those, let me see.
How would they?
What you do is you cut them, you know. You cut them, and then they have, what do I call it? The rail, J-channel like,
Okay.
J-channel on there, and you form them you cut them into that, so you're cutting them on an angle as you bring them down, and then you put a cover over them.
I guess, would it be narrower on the bay roof, since it's such a small little area, so they're not like this wide connecting those 3 planes?
You mean the visual mark, like the width of the?
No, this thing
Of the
here,
raised
like this,
things?
like where the different,
Right.
you see like
The
that
width
wide,
between each little
not
raised.
the width between each, but like where, like the two sections meet.
Something that it would look
There's like that big wide.
The color-wise, yes.
Color-wise, but not necessarily. Is this not standing
I just wonder if that's gonna
seam?
be narrower. I don't know.
You mean like the ridge cap equivalent?
That appears to be.
I'm sorry, Rich.
Something
Yeah,
pretty
thank you.
similar, at least.
Okay.
That's it.
You,
Because it'll look,
Oh, it could be.
it'll look funny like on a big
Yeah.
window
yeah,
if they're like this
standing,
wide.
standing seams, you don't see the screws, which I really
They're a high
like.
quality seam. Yeah, they use them on copper roofs as well.
Right.
The
And,
double batten seams, oh, isn't that gorgeous?
Well,
I'm sorry.
You want to pass that around? I just pulled up a quick picture to get a visual because I
Want to see? Yeah.
Want to see
you know,
the
just
color.
from my experience, I personally kind of like steel roofs, and I'll tell you, like when I go to out east, like you see a lot of them in New Hampshire, Maine, and Vermont. You know, they get a lot of snow there, even in the UP, and actually some historical homes do have roofs like this.
There is a home that is on the, I don't remember if it's a state or national registry, and by Sheet Metal out
That's
of
cool.
Grand Rapids did a whole copper roof on that home, and it's now a historic museum. It was some doctor in the day in the town of Holland, but it was now that one was a like-for-like replacement. They were restoring that roof.
Right.
But it was very attractive, and of course a very high-quality product. Is what, you said this is, what kind of metal is this again, 18 gauge?
No, it's 26 gauge.
Oh, I'm sorry, 26, but
26
it's
gauge.
steel? So when you say it's the paint that's guaranteed, is it like a galvanization process? Like a galvanized or like the equivalent of steel, what do you call it, powder coated?
You know what? I think it may be where they do it. That process. A guy in Cadillac did that, Kevin. He did that where you put a charge on it, and there's metal in the paint.
Oh, that's what they do in powder coating. Yeah.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
I think
So you can
that's
do all
what-
sorts of colors and.
I'm not sure that the process, but I can just attest that my own personal house, 109 North Park. I like the way it looks, and it went on. I think it has curb appeal, and I think that this one would as well. And again, I realize that it's not replacing what was on there. You know, there was asphalt shingles on there, but asphalt shingles are limited in their life. I suppose a metal roof is too, but you know, metal roofs, and I don't want to associate with barns, but you know, they last a long time. And that's what I like about the raised seam, because I feel that the raised seam is not, it doesn't appear to be barn steel or pole barn steel. Mm-hmm. My neighbor put on 29 gauge. Now gauge, what it means is it means 29 sheets in an inch. Mm-hmm. Okay? 26 sheets in an inch. So that's how they gauge it. But I went and felt his when they were putting it on. Oh, there was a significant difference between my 26 gauge and his 29 gauge. Now he used standing seam on his as well, but there's just a difference, thicker.
Okay.
Are you done asking
Any other
your
questions?
questions, Mark? Yeah, I have some questions. I'm just curious on this, it's, at least in this picture, it looks like, now this is, excuse me, this illustration up here, you can see the vertical lines, they're those seams. I think those are, I forgot what they're called, half seams or something. Anyway, those are very, like you're gonna catch the shadow of light on those seams. Like you would on a shingle, a raised shingle, you're gonna catch a shadow and a different look, you know? On these, you're gonna catch that. This right here, these three examples, you see, this has, and it could just be the copy of the print of the picture, but this looks like these little mini seam thingies are raised more than they
They
are
are.
on the top one.
They are.
So you're going with the one on the top? So that is the one, so that is the equivalent of one section between each of those two things. Is that what I'm looking at? That right there is like between
Yes.
one point
I mean,
and another.
Yes, the raised seam.
You know what I
yes.
mean?
Yes, they're 16 inches, and
Okay.
so you've got
So
about
it's
14 and a
relatively
half
flat.
between here,
Uh-huh.
and then
Those, yes. That would
That
be
is between that.
correct.
Okay, so we aren't seeing these extra ridges really
No,
between there.
absolutely.
It looks pretty smooth between.
No,
Okay, that's what I was
no.
trying to understand.
Okay.
Does
Yeah.
that make sense to you? Mm-hmm. I mean, I know you're recusing, but you might be interested anyway in answering my question. Okay, now when you say, I forgot what you said, classic copper, whatever, happy copper.
Native.
Native. Okay, there you go. What is that? Or when you say that, what is that? What is their definition of native copper? Is it like a green, a brown, or?
Oh, no. It's copper color, like.
Because I mean, copper goes
copper,
green or
like
brown.
that.
Copper, peninsula copper, like
It depends on the weather as to what color it goes, though. You know, I mean, is
Right.
it a brown color or is it a green color?
It's not. It's
Like a penny.
gold, like.
Oh, it's like the
Sort of
picture
like
she
that,
showed.
yes.
Can you show
Silver.
him that picture so I can make sure I know what I'm asking?
It's meant not to oxidize and change color.
Yeah, so it's gonna look like it's new copper is what you're telling me? Kind of?
Sort of, but it's sort of.
There are variations of the color.
I don't want to call it brown.
Well, how about that
It's
picture
not
you
brown,
just had a
but
second ago?
it's
That was almost that.
brown copper kind of. No, I don't want to say brown.
What about, is it something like that?
It isn't similar, but it isn't quite that brilliant. I
So it's
don't
a brownish coppery, it's
Yeah,
not
yes.
green,
More-
just
no,
curious.
no.
Just
not
for
at
a
all.
look, I'm just curious if it was
Yeah.
like a green on a green versus a brown
right.
on.
Sure.
Okay. Well, my own thoughts on this, we do have some precedent in what we've done in the past with, I think it was maybe Dr. Wolf's house. I don't know who was here at the time, his garage. And we did allow a metal roof on there, and it wasn't, now the thing is if you had the original roofing material on this, my read of these documents and our guidelines would be that now the question is you have the original material, that's where we would be strongly encouraging like for like, unless there was like an economic reason you really couldn't do that sort of a thing. But when it's already asphalt, it is on a contributing structure, but it is a non-contributing product. So then the question becomes, in my mind, the way I read the guidelines, okay, the look of asphalt, you're looking at a shingle, because this probably would have been a cedar shingled roof originally on a home this style, this size, this character of Queen Anne. So it could have had a metal roof. There are some Queen Anne's that have had metal roofs, but generally this kind of mid-range sizing, it probably would have been a cedar roof in this particular area, though other Queen Anne's have had metal roofs perhaps, and the one in Holland is not a Queen Anne, but it's a historic home that had a metal roof. So, but it's a matter of whether the decision of whether it needs to go with the look of a shingle, which is probably what was there originally, but if there are no documented pictures of what the home was originally, we don't technically know, nor do you, if it was originally cedar or something else. But most of the homes would have been cedar. You wouldn't have necessarily had like a slate tile roof on a wood frame home. That would have been too heavy of a product on top compared to the wood frame below, right? So it makes sense that it probably was cedar shingle. That's what most of them were. So from that perspective, are we going to stick on the point of it needs to look like a shingle, which asphalt does, but asphalt wears out faster and is, depending on what you buy in asphalt, can be a less appealing product than what you might see in metal, in my opinion. That's just my own opinion. Sure. And the reason I would consider metal is I agree it's a longer lasting product. You get more for your money. It has been on historic homes in the past of this nature, though maybe in this area, maybe not. That we don't know unless we have documentation of this home in its original state, like at the museum or something. But it's also, it's a higher quality product. So you already have a non-contributing product, so I don't feel obligated to lock you into staying with this non-contributing product, which is an asphalt roof. You know what I mean? So then it becomes the question if we're going a non-contributing product to another non-contributing product just because it probably wasn't the original product on the roof, right? So non to non, it's kind of like whatever as long as it looks good, right? But now you're looking at the question is these lines are going to clearly change the roof line and character of how that structure looks versus an asphalt shingle, as much as I really dislike asphalt extremely, but it still would look shingled, if it was an asphalt product. So that's our question, right? is that we're boiling it down to the aesthetic look, because you're still looking at two non-contributing products.
Except all asphalt shingles, in my opinion, are not created equally.
No,
If you
they're
look at
not,
the-
that's
if you
true.
Look at the house in
higher end ones
between
can be quite nice,
this
yeah.
home and Michelle's home, that other home, it's very flat looking. And a lot of homes have that really flat, I think they're single tab shingles, what they might
Well,
be.
yours are a much higher quality.
Right, and it has a
Yes.
thickness to it.
Dimensional.
Yeah, and I just
Yes,
think this
exactly.
metal roof would look
I
much
still think
better, in
this-
my opinion, than a really, like a inexpensive, single tab asphalt roof. That's just my opinion.
I agree. I think it would look better. You know, it's a matter of if we have, you know, if we want to go with that wiggle room to say we're already in a non-contributing product. So
Yeah.
for me, it makes me open to the metal
Yeah.
because you're actually improving the quality of the home. And you're improving the longevity. I mean, your main thing is to preserve these homes too. So,
That's, I mean,
You know.
that's sort of what I thought. We want to preserve these homes, and a metal roof on here.
now, Tom, my only issue is this. You know this is in the historic district because you came before us before when you had
Yes,
work done. Yeah,
yes.
so don't tell me you didn't know it was in the
I mean,
historic district.
I did.
Okay?
You know what? You know what? You know what, Gwen? I really, I got to be honest with you. It didn't even cross my mind, you know, to think about it, because when I looked at that, and I look at it every day because it's across the street from me. When I looked at it, I just thought, if I ever replace that, I want to do metal. I mean, that was where my thought were. Or not only that, because it's a big house, you know, and with metal on it, and there isn't a chimney on it, by the way. I mean, that was on there. That chimney is gone. There's really only two. There's two stink pipes or whatever on the back side of the lower roof, which would be on the east side. Other than that, there's no other protrusions on the roof. So,
Because we're looking at the east side, are we not?
no, we're looking at this is west.
Looking east.
We're looking east, now that is south. I mean, where the
Oh.
4 windows are, that's the south side of the
We're looking
house.
north. I got
And
you.
then toward that brown house to the right,
Yes.
that's east, okay?
So
That's
the west
east.
side, okay, we're looking east is the west
Yes,
side.
yes.
I got you.
But
So which side which side are the pipes on?
they're on the east side.
Okay, so
They would
they're,
be
so we wouldn't see
opposite.
them. No
they
one would see them then.
They would be,
basically.
no, they would be
Okay.
opposite of the lower roof as you face it. You see the
Opposite
two
of the
sets
side we see.
Yeah.
And there are these like ventilation?
They're actually what they call stick pipes. You have to have a breather for your sewer, and that's what those are. And
Gotta breathe. How far above the roof do they go? They're not that high above the roof.
oh, not at all.
Yeah, so
And-
we wouldn't see them. if
No,
they're on the other side
absolutely
at all.
not. You won't
Okay.
see them from this side, and you can put a boot on them. You can put a boot on them, and there's no problem with them leaking.
What does our architect say? What do you say, Pat?
I say to
What
put it on the floor. I would move that we proceed to approve the application as presented by the owner.
I'm really torn. I love that you're putting a metal roof on because I love metal. I love that you're choosing a copper tone. I do not like the modern look going against its proximity and everything. I'm really torn. You know, like Gwen was saying, you know, what's the final, like, yeah.
I
The
don't think we
standing
can say it
seam.
wasn't a metal roof to begin with.
If
I
we don't
think
have
we can say that it
documentation.
wasn't a metal roof to begin with. It may have been
In the Upper
metal.
Peninsula,
Oh,
you do see
right,
roofs like
right.
this.
But
on
I'm
old
talking
homes.
about the standing seam grooves. The shape of it is pretty modern. It's not.
Oh, you're seeing the secondary bumps.
Yeah, that's all.
Can I just ask you a quick, because I want to show this, because Gwen,
Actually, this is very
the
much
term is
like
ridge
to
cap.
like.
That's what I was
Yes,
trying to
this
think
is
of.
very much like
Do you
to
think
like
that they
the
make
copper
a
roof
smaller
that
one for
they
like that bay area?
replaced
Because this is really
on
like
the-
wide. I
on
mean,
that home in
by the time you get that on the
Which
big
I know
window,
that
it's going to be like
But I mean, that one
three
was
big
that one.
strips with.
Yeah. Oh,
Do you
okay.
think they
I mean,
make
it
a
was-
narrower ridge cap for
It didn't look
tiny
like
areas like
You had
this?
real ridge cap. I think this little chins here, these ridge
Like a,
caps,
just
but
a narrower instead of that,
actually you have,
instead of
these are
that
called
wide.
single seams here.
They
and this
may.
right here,
Because that almost
Copper
looks
is double
16
back,
inches as wide as
copper
this
over it,
thing.
and crimped the
Or
edges
maybe
of
not
the
quite, but at least
curve.
10
So
inches
actually, it's
wide.
very
Yeah.
look.
I was just curious.
I know that I did a bay
Right. just
on
thought it was very
my
striking
house,
and modern looking, and I
it
didn't
turned
think
out
that
great.
this
It
Okay,
looked great.
yeah.
I mean, it wasn't, it didn't look gaudy.
Well, I thought it was within
At
like
all.
20 years.
Okay.
No, it's not.
Okay,
You know what
thanks,
is
Tom.
making it look modern to you is that any detailing that would have been under your roof line, that's what's gone. But that was
Maybe-
taken off a long time ago when they threw up an asphalt roof.
Okay, well then in that case, I have no problem.
Ann was talking about it looking modern, and I'm not sure, and Pat would probably know better than I do, but Mark, or Michelle, but my impression is a lot of these homes, when they threw on an asphalt roof in the days past, there was more ornamentation, whether it be brackets or dentils or things like this under your roof line and at the roof edge, depending on how the drip edge was done. There possibly was more, which if we don't have documentation, we don't have it, but there was possibly more ornamentation, giving it a chunkier roof look, giving it a more solid, heavy appearance than it has, because once you replace with the asphalt, all you have is a very straight line there, and it almost looks thin and flat, you know, on the whole edge of your roof where the drip edge is. So sometimes the drip edge, you had a gutter incorporated into that, and the gutter, the outside of it, looked like a crown molding. So you had a lot more decorative look sometimes on these homes, that if you had something like that on a copper roof, that's normally with copper, you'd see that element in there. So, because it's usually incorporated with the gutter when you have copper.
Yeah.
So it would not have that modern feel you're thinking of or seeing.
Yeah, it just seemed very modern and striking, and I didn't realize it was so comparable. Okay.
Well, and sometimes when you say modern, we see a lot of what I call pole barn roofs, and their ribs are much wider.
Yes.
Really.
Yes.
I just like those. This is just a very fine line.
1 inch raised seam.
1 inch high. It's probably only
1 inch high.
It might be a ½ inch wide at the most.
Right. They're not very wide, and they lock. I should maybe give you a picture of how they go together. But you have the standing seam on one side, and then you have the attachment loopholes, you know, where you affix it to the roof, and it's kind of cool. It just kind of snaps in there and curls right around it, and you got a nice tight fit, and it works like a champ. It's really a neat process.
I guess I was envisioning something more with thicker, what do you call them? These part right here.
Ribs.
Ribs, yeah, thank you. Yep, okay.
I bought some diffractors for mine, and I went up to put them on, and I couldn't get them on, and I took them back to Bigelow's. And, you know, those are those diffractors that are sort of like fan-shaped things that break up the ice, so you don't have 14.5 inches of 1.5 inch ice coming down. And they were the right ones. I did order the right ones. I'm glad, because they were about $400, but they do fit on those, and I would put some on those as well. I mean, they're just they're diffractors to.
What do they look like?
It's a safety.
Yeah, I know.
They're,
it is. Is it just
they're-
like the little nubs, or how much?
No,
do
they're sort of like a tail of a turkey, kind of. You know, this kind of action. They're sort of
How high
like
up
a
do they
half.
stick? I mean, how high up? How elevated are they?
Probably about that high. They're about that high, and most. You don't put them everywhere, but you put them where
Traffic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
where you're going to enter the house and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and there are some, like, on that street, not in the historical district, but some of those metal roofs do have them. They're like little things that kind of stick up, and it just protects the,
Well, we have them on the Mitchell house, but they're just like a clip thing. But I've never seen them where it looks like a little fan.
Well, that's what it looks like. It kind of looks like a semicircle, you know, and
What are they made of?
metal. They're made of metal.
anybody else have any questions or comments?
Pat did make a motion.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'm going to second the motion that we accept this project.
I'll take a roll call vote on this. Bear with me, gang. Okay. Engels,
Yes.
Bertels,
Yes.
Dubravik,
Yes.
Snyder.
Yes.
The motion passes.
Thank you. I gotta be honest, I did not think you were gonna pass it.
I thought you were going to talk yourself out of getting it passed.
Tom, okay, this is my only caveat. Because you did not come to us first, and you know you're in the restaurant, I think you should make a nice big donation to the museum's restoration. Because we're doing a museum restoration. And you could even be an ad sponsor for $500 in the upcoming game.
You know what? I could consider that.
Well, it would be appreciated.
I could. I need a little more write-off.
There you
Oh,
go.
hey, it's all good.
Okay.
I just have one more, like, this home is said to be a Queen Anne. Wouldn't this be more considered like a farmhouse?
It looks more like a folk Victorian.
Maybe so.
Yeah, kind of, yeah. I mean, so I've always loved this home.
I think it was added on. I mean, I
Oh,
don't-
yeah.
Oh, the
the
back
back.
says, yeah.
I don't think
yeah.
that was all
The backside
original.
was, yeah.
I know that, yeah, it's
It's a cool house.
a little different.
I think
The north side of the house is wood, and the two-story is aluminum. All right, so there's two different, and when we painted it, I used super paint from Sherwin-Williams, and it was great. No primer, just, you know, it was $50 a gallon. Luckily, I got it for 35, but it was great, and it went on well, it covered well, and I didn't have to put any primer on, which I thought was great. And I've been very happy with it. Super paint.
Great.
Super.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
Thanks, Tom. Next item on the agenda under new business is discuss and determine if exterior HVAC work done at the Cobbs and Mitchell building without HDC approval qualifies for a certificate of appropriateness, and if not, whether the owner must submit a work application to bring it into compliance, including timeframes and recommendations.
I believe the next thing on the agenda is actually the work application for the Carnegie Library. I apologize.
Oh, you're right. Okay. Well, actually, you know what? Can I switch it around?
Sure.
All right, yeah. So one of the complicating factors with this is after we developed this agenda item, we received a work application.
Yes, you did.
From the owner of the Cobbs and Mitchell building, and this is would be subcategory D under new business. A work application for the Cobbs and Mitchell building exterior HVAC lines and the owner proposed copper covering. Also, there will be additional painting and staining to the back of the building. So what I'd like to do with this is just initially make a couple comments and then open it up to discussion. But my concern with all of this is that I did have a conversation with a couple of folks from SHPO. I talked to Robert McKay, and then I also talked to Deborah Ball Johnson. And both of them expressed concern about work being done to the exterior of this particular resource without SHPO's involvement. And Deborah Johnson advised me of the, there's basically a covenant, historical preservation covenant, that applies to that property. And then Robert McKay doesn't per se work with the historical preservation covenant issues, but he is the person who's responsible for administrating applications for tax credits. And he told me that he has had a number of conversations with Rob Mungar and that he has not received an application for tax credits. And he made clear, he being Robert McKay, made clear that Mr. Mungar does need to work with SHPO with respect to any of the changes that are made to the exterior. And I did talk to him about the work that was recently done, and in particular the HVAC units, or the compressors that have been placed at the rear of the building, which essentially effectively is the front of the building, and also the conduit that's running up the side of the building. And in addition to that, I talked to him about the windows, but that's a separate issue for now. And McKay told me that Mungar should have presented that to SHPO before he made the changes to the exterior with respect to the HVAC. He did not like the fact that that system was placed on, and that he didn't like the fact the conduit was on the exterior of the building in an area that's so visibly prominent. And he did not, I didn't ask him specifically about the compressors, but my impression was that that also was an issue. So the position that puts us in, I mean, we're not responsible for enforcing the historic preservation covenant. In my estimation, in my opinion, I don't think that's our job. But it is our job to consider the fact that it exists. I mean, that's part of, it's a restriction on this property, and that property in and of itself is an historic district in our city that we're responsible for. It's a National Register building, and it's on the state register as well. So what I was hoping is that Mr. Munger would get on the phone with the folks from SHPO and determine a solution to what SHPO's identified as something that's not acceptable, and come back to us with something we can work with, an application that is something we know the state is comfortable with. Any comments from everybody else?
If SHPO was in control, why are we in the middle?
Well, because we have our own responsibilities to make decisions with respect to that building, because the Cobbs and Mitchell building is a local historic district. So we have,
Totally agreed, but if SHPO is, if we're following SHPO guidelines, this whole commission is doing that, why don't we let them enforce it and tell them what they need to do?
Well, of course they can enforce them, but if we know that SHPO is objecting because it does not comply with the Secretary of Interior standards, and then if you can tell me why you think that that exterior alteration complies with the Secretary.
Needs to change.
Right, so that's kind of where I'm at. It's more of a common sense situation that it makes sense to be aligned with SHPO in our interpretation of the guidelines as they apply to that building.
So what do we do? I mean, what do we want to do tonight? Are we making a motion that, are we going to send SHPO a letter saying, hey?
No, what I'm suggesting is that Mike instruct the property owner to come back to us with an application, a revised application. I mean, he's presented one to put copper covers on it. I mean, we can
just reject that.
We can reject it now if if that's, you know, the course that you want to take. But it makes, I want to work with this property owner and create more of a cooperative atmosphere, and maybe that can be accomplished by the property owner willingly coming back with an improved application. We don't have to act on his application for 60 days, all right? He obviously knows that he can't make any more changes to that exterior system. He submitted an application, so he obviously knows he needs to apply to us before he makes changes. So I would just prefer, rather than doing it piecemeal, to just have him come in with an acceptable proposal that we can act on in a positive way.
And obviously, an acceptable proposal means he needs to...
If the application comes in, he agrees to change it, we negotiate a way, change it to this and it's okay, it still may not be okay with SHPO.
Right, and we make our own decisions in that regard, but I think it is advisable to listen to what SHPO says.
Well, it just seems would be proper for him to go to SHPO, which really is the federal government also, they're the watchdog, and get their blessings on whatever he's going to do, and then bring it to us.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Okay,
Yes,
great.
I'm sorry if I wasn't clear.
I agree
Yeah,
with that.
yeah.
And I think... I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to ask, should we not make any comments as far as suggestions, what might...
Oh, absolutely you can.
We can, even this meeting,
Yes.
we can. Okay,
Yeah.
because I had a couple ideas.
Okay.
Sure.
That cover, I think that would look really odd, covering all that insulated conduit, you know, for that HVAC system. But, you know, I was thinking, you know, either it has to go back inside, or the other thing, it's possible that building used to have rain gutters, like where the building kind of indents in, and maybe on the corners, you know, he could possibly put some of that inside of false rain gutters, and not those half things, because that would look like just a big piece of copper conduit running down the side in several places. Any thoughts on that?
I have thoughts, because from what I've seen, he's not done, well, let me just read a little bit. I printed this off today from the Standards for Restoration and Guidelines for Restoring Historic Buildings as defined by the Secretary of Interior Standards. So I did not print out the whole document, which was hundreds of, you know, over a couple hundred pages, something like that. But just in looking at that, whether you were doing restoration or preservation or rehabilitation, reconstruction, anything you're doing on a historic building, limited and sensitive upgrading of mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems and other code-required work to make properties functional is appropriate. However, new exterior additions are not within the scope of this treatment for preservation, okay, which is pretty much what he's doing. He's preserving what's there in this building. Now, we know the building needs to be up to code, whatever. Well, it was up to code before without this HVAC system. And he did not come to us. Had he, we could have looked at the location we think is the least obtrusive, because if those units have to be exterior, they don't have to be on the south corridor coming into town. And it would not be an inordinately expensive, especially for someone with the money to develop a building like this, for those to be moved to the east side. Now, I don't know that everyone feels the same that I do, but that's the least visually obtrusive area. All four could be lined up there. And as far as the conduits go, completely inappropriate. He has them snaking up the building and going in the top. If anything, even at the location he chose for the, whatever those things are, condensers or generators, whatever they are, those could have gone through the base of the building and then snaked inside, whether in a conduit inside or whatever. But our purview, our say in it, regardless of what SHPO and all that, our guidelines are already in place in regards to how to handle this, and it's what is the least obtrusive and you know, and least visually disturbing to the line of the building, to the historic character and all of that. So if he needs these systems, understandable, we, you know, probably need to work within that, but they could go to the east end of the building, but the conduits can be drilled, just like he drilled holes in the top of the building that weren't there before without permission for nothing but sticking a new pipe through, right? So he can drill holes on the east side of the building in a less obtrusive manner. And if there is anything that it should be going low down in the building, and then all of that can be snaking up interiorly, you know, in an inobtrusive area or a room that's used for storage, whatever, you know, in some way he can, even a false panel or something in there to hide that on the interior. But so that's my opinion, is just say no to this. No, we don't want the copper conduit, and that yes, he has to move those to the east side of the building.
Okay, then that brings up something, because I've noticed that, and I swear somebody told me it was just temporary, but could you explain the alley? Was that vacated?
No.
Okay, so it's just temporary.
This property here, from this building is built, it appears, right on the property line.
Okay.
Under the right-of-way, there are utilities.
Mm-hmm.
There are
Underneath there?
utilities
Okay.
that run from Chapin Street to Stimson under here.
That grassy area?
This is not vacated.
Okay.
What it is, and that's why this was done, because the church parking lot is, when the city has, for example, vacated an alley, that sort of thing, and I'm not aware of us ever doing it in an alley that's got utilities underneath it, but the easement agreements always stipulate that there can be no type of construction in the easement. Or if you do it, it is at your own risk. But there definitely, this area to the east, he does not own, and there are definitely underground utilities running down that alley.
Did they used to be paved?
Yeah, it was.
Yes.
It was, and he got with the, I believe, and John would know more than I would, but he got with the church and said, do you need, because remember the alley is only 12 foot wide.
Right.
And that's kind of where the fire marshal got involved, because he said, you got to have fire trucks. You got to be able to get around. And of course, he did want ingress, egress off of Mitchell, so it would be wider. So my understanding, and John again would know more than I would, is got with the church and basically said, do you actually need that driveway off of Chapin when they've already got another driveway off of Chapin, I think right by the attorney's office in the parking lot. So how that conversation went. I wasn't involved, but I do know that, again, he does not own that property and there are underground utilities.
Okay.
So,
If I'm not mistaken, when was that building voted into the historic district? 2011? Is that right? 2011? Because this picture says from 2009, but it looks like there's already, I've circled lots of the, what do you want to call it?
sure, a lot of electrical wires.
The
Electrical wires,
the
things
electrical
like that.
wiring, they're hanging down in almost the same exact spots. So is he really changing all that much other than the units that are now behind the building? Because they look like they've been there since, well, you know.
I think you're talking about going around the two windows. Around the two windows, yeah.
I see
this was
three
there.
of them.
We also had wires running up the wall to this light.
Right, and if that was done before it was voted into the historic district, there's nothing we could have done about that.
But once it goes away, we can keep it off.
But you were saying he drilled holes, and I'm wondering
Oh,
if
there
though,
may not- you're right, there might not have been drilled holes.
I'm wondering if he's just using the existing
Yeah,
holes.
You've got that, but you've also got a light up here.
So he wasn't,
You've got a light up here
he's
with
just kind of
wires.
following the path that was already there,
Were there
not,
really four?
well, I don't
You know
know.
what I mean?
Right. That's,
And
that,
I've got a quick question for you, because you know this building better than anybody here. What the heck was this thing?
I can't see what that thing
Is
is.
that a vent?
looks like
It
a
looks like
vent.
some-
It looks like a
Right.
vent. Yeah, this thing right here. And again, you can see the wires coming up the building.
So how many are there that you see there, Mike?
Two.
Just
Pardon?
two
Wires.
wires that you see?
In
that picture at least?
I see one
The
here.
vent and then two.
What is kind of interesting is the old light pole here.
Yeah?
That had a wire running from there to the building. So
Right.
that wire is now gone.
Right, I see that right here.
And of course, I think what's really for me, the most striking thing about the picture you took, Michelle, is you look at the old driveway, and there were a number of reasons to lower it. One, again, had to do with the fire marshal and the grade for fire trucks and so forth. But, you know, obviously, when this building was built, they didn't have windows, I'm assuming, right at ground level. And I don't know if snow in that, you know, if moisture and everything got in the basement, I'm assuming it did. But I'm looking at where this ground level was, literally at the bottom of the windows. And I look at how it looks now down here, and I mean, I think it looks pretty cool. And I know he spent, I think, $12,000, $13,000 purchasing limestone, you know, to put that along there.
Which I think he's also going to stain to match.
Well, there is definitely masonry work that needs to be done. There's no question, and there's more masonry work. The mason, Shepherd's, is extremely busy, like most contractors. And I know he said one of his contractors that he wants to do some work just said, I can't get at it for 2 months. And I don't know if it was a mason, I don't know if it was an electrician, because he's now working on the lower level.
I was just going by what he had said when he was actually in front of us last time. I think he had
And I
mentioned it.
Yeah, certainly take his word for it.
Yeah.
The other thing I really liked is that being in the B2 Central Business District. I shouldn't say this. The B2 Central Business District allows for a business to have a pole sign up to 40 feet high. And he, of course, stuck with the low monument one. And I think that's in limestone also. But we discourage big signs.
Right.
We discourage. We can't prevent them if someone wants it. Well, we sometimes can. But anyway, the most startling thing to me about the picture from 10 years ago was the look underneath the
height.
windows.
Yeah.
So I have a question. If you have, and like for instance, on the far east side of the building there on the back, there's still one of those wires, and then it goes up, it takes a left, and then instead of wrapping back down, you see loose dangling wires floating out in the air, which he probably plans on doing something with. You know, because he's conscientious about trying to take care of the building, but those are just like floating wires, so surely they're disconnected or whatever.
There's no question his work is not done.
Yes,
I mean,
yes.
there's no question.
But
And-
I guess the point is that even those wires that are there, mostly, even that is, it's already there for one thing, and if it's being used, fine. But it's as far east as it can be, and it's within a metal conduit. It's not this sloppy, snaking black thing, which is far more eye-attracting. Yes. Than the conduits that went up. But the other thing is, we very tactfully asked him to explain what was going on, because he was doing all sorts of stuff, and nothing he's done came before us. Now, it may or may not have needed approval, but it's still supposed to be reviewed by this commission. So in having him come last time, clearly it was, it seemed as if the message was clearly there that if there are actions on this building, they need to come before this commission. And yet he's proceeded in putting in the HVAC systems now and not mentioning a word. So that's concerning, because he's not listening.
Well, when
you know,
he was
to
here
that.
in June, when you got the maintenance update, it was mentioned that he had, applied for the mechanical permits.
Right, but we had no
But we
idea
didn't review it.
it was going to be, look like this on the exterior.
So that's where there's a lack. If that is a permitted issue, obviously great. The city took the permit and then they did not forward it to the Historic District Commission.
Well,
Where did
they
it to
they
come
took
next?
his, they actually took his permit, and they did not accept it because they wanted a engineered plan showing airflow for both heat and that, and that, of course, dictated, I can't speak for them, I'm assuming it dictated part of what they did because they had to make changes from what the mechanical contractor originally planned to do. But there is no question that AGS, before they would issue a mechanical permit, required this engineering work that where they had every little room and they were calculating cubic feet per minute and whatever that was. Pat understands that more than me because I'm not a builder.
Well,
But
that's obviously very relevant and important, because you don't want a backflow of air, or, the system has to
Sure.
work properly, obviously, and that's the engineer's job, to make sure it works properly. But our job is to look at the aesthetics of the building and to work with the other folks that are providing permitted permission through the
Sure.
permit system of what is or is not okay. But the fact is that all of this went through other steps and was done and completed, and nothing came to us. And that's not okay,
I understand.
And we just kind of spoke a month ago about, okay, great, well, we'll look forward to seeing what else you're doing, i.e. come before us and talk about it, because now it may or may not cost him much money, but
Well, do we have
You
any
know.
say over the actual AC units that are in the back of the building because they're away from the actual building?
well,
Yeah, I
we
Because
do,
of their
frankly.
placement on them? I wasn't sure about that.
maybe the city's outside counsel can comment on that, but I think we
No,
do
here's a
have,
I apologize. Here's a quick, you, for example, your carriage house, you rent office space. Now, did you come before the HDC when you put your air conditioning in? You did, okay. Because I know I've seen that, and First Pres Church has air conditioning, and
yeah.
'Cause-
I'm sorry, would council like to comment on the authority of the HDC with respect to the actual units?
Yeah,
They could be taken out. Our authority is that. We could be overrided if we chose
Well,
to
I'm
say
asking
we're
council,
gonna-
I'm asking council, though,
Okay.
for a legal opinion.
Yeah, I'm not sure specifically on the units themselves, but I'll offer a broader perspective. I mean, I think the real issue is he didn't come before the HDC and get the proper approvals, period. Nor did he go to SHPO and get their approval. But I agree with you that the process should have been, or should be, submitted to SHPO, table your decision for now, see what SHPO says about it, because SHPO, as far as I understand, is reviewing it under the same guidelines as you would review it under. Then you'll have some determination, at least from SHPO, because what you could do is you could get into an issue where this commission is saying one thing, SHPO is saying another thing, you're both looking at the same guidelines.
Right.
And so I think it's better that you inform the applicant, we're tabling it for now. If you don't have this stuff back within 60 days, we're going to deny it. That triggers various appeal periods. But in the meantime, go to SHPO, get their approval, their comments, whatever he needs from SHPO pursuant to the covenants, come back to you, make on the same application, and then you'll have an idea what SHPO is going to say. And at that time, hopefully, both SHPO and the HDC align in their view of the issue.
Right.
Because one thing's clear, right? The normal process would be application here, certificate, take it to the building department, building permits are issued.
Right.
If you deny the permit, it's binding on the building department, they can't issue permits under the statute. It seems to me that that's the best course of action. Give SHPO the first shot at it, because then, because you're looking at the same guidelines, you'll have a better idea of what even SHPO thinks of it.
Right. Does
I
he?
just think we need to come across as very positive. This is a tremendously positive project for Cadillac.
Yes,
I
I'm
really could have been torn down.
Yeah, we would
ecstatic
just.
that he's worked
Yeah.
so hard preserving as much as he could and working, like even the historic plaque, he's gone to length. So I love all the work and all the hard work that he's done.
I think that's good. So how can we help him in this process? And Mike, was the air conditioning engineering predicated on the basis that they could not place condensers in the alley? Did they know that?
Well, if they didn't know it, we would have said no.
Well, I think that could be challenged,
Right.
quite frankly.
Right.
And at this commission, I
Sure,
would say-
you've worked with it
because,
enough. Yeah.
You know, a condenser is portable. I mean, you can
Right.
pick that thing up and move it anytime. So if you had to go through the alley, and you're not going to be that tight to the building, even though there's only 12 feet, but they could be suspended, they could be taken off and set around the corner. I think there's an argument that they could go there. Obviously, approvals need to be made and agreements how that
City
would be,
council
but
would
that
be
would be
involved.
so much better. As Gwen had pointed out, I mean, that's the ideal way. Set
Right.
them there, go inside, put a chase inside, which is not going to affect the historic nature. There were vaults back there, that's probably what they'd go through. And
Great.
that just seems like a good way to do it.
Right.
But
Well,
I
and
didn't know whether
that's-
they had that information that, no, you couldn't do it, and so that's their solution.
If they were certainly never told by the zoning administrator, no. I mean, that discussion never came up between me and the mechanical contractor. I've never met them. You know, they don't even submit that paperwork to me. But the hard thing for me, and I know all of you live in the district and I get it all, but I just, I look at a picture like this and I look at some of the ugly stuff that's been removed, such as the cinder block, what I've always called a bunker, and I look at some of this, and I look at, instead of these lights here, he's got a couple of attractive ones over the entryway, and for me, it's, you're torn because he's removed some really ugly stuff, yet some of what he's put back clearly is not attractive. So,
Yeah.
Well, it's hard. You're absolutely right. You don't want to be punitive or negative about it, but we also know he has these non-contributing windows in the wings that he's purchased, but unlike the gentleman that was here before, the original window was there. So like for like now comes back into play. And so he may have purchased them, but if it came before us, I myself would definitely not vote for those windows. And discussion with SHPO has reflected that those are completely non-contributing, unacceptable windows as well. So he can leave them like they are or replicate somewhat in a newer product perhaps, something that fits the style and all of that of the building. So I guess the concern for me is, as we address this issue with the conduits and whatnot, the bigger issue is that we asked him to come forward and keep us in the loop, and that didn't happen, okay? And so we still have those windows out there, but there had been a window app, it was withdrawn, now it's coming, now that hasn't come up again, the windows, but he did discuss that with us when he came and spoke before us. So that's part of what concerned, at least me personally, that he's moving forward doing stuff without bringing anything to us, because it's like, well, okay, do we want to wake up one day and these windows that are clearly need a discussion and approval before they would go in, what if all of a sudden those windows are in place? That kind of thing. That's where I'm like, wait, no, he didn't hear us the first time he came here. So,
But
I'm glad he's now put in an application for this, but it's after he clearly knew we were not okay with it just going on without approval.
Right.
So his application came in after Michelle submitted a letter to the city council about the way things were going and city staff not communicating with us and getting stuff to us.
Well, he did mention
So-
he was working with SHPO from the first time that we met him, and he did say that it was his first historic building that he was renovating, restoring. So I was kind of gonna lean him some leeway. If you don't know, you don't know. You think you're doing whatever. He did say he was working with SHPO, so I'm fine with referring to and waiting to see what SHPO, now that they're enforcing and saying, hold on, and they're taking a step in, I'm fine with waiting to see what they have to say. I definitely have my own opinions about what we could vote on it today, but I think it might be a moot point, so I'm fine with waiting.
I think that's what we need to do, but I assume we need to contact Mr. Munger anyway.
Right, so let me formulate
It would be nice if that's a friendly.
a proposed
Letter.
motion for action. I propose that Mike Coy or John Wallace advise the landowner, probably in writing would be better, that the commission is tabling the work application as well as its decision regarding any sort of, I don't want to say punitive, but any sort of action on the work that was performed without HTC approval. So both of those agenda items we're tabling. And we're advising the property owner to contact SHPO and find out what he needs to do to submit applications to do the HVAC work appropriately. And then once SHPO has made a decision with respect to a solution for the HVAC, then advise this commission as to SHPO's decision, recommendations, or approval. Sound about right?
Yep.
Do I have a motion to that effect? A motion? Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Okay.
To that effect.
Okay. A second?
Put it in quotes, to that effect.
Seconded.
I second.
And, okay.
Okay, and then a roll, did you want to do a roll, Mike?
I would like to, yes, I definitely would like to. Engels, motion to table,
Yes,
per.
thank you.
Dubravik,
Yes.
Bertles,
Yes.
Carter,
Yes.
Snyder.
Yes.
I want to check and make sure this is running because that's the only way to get it exactly as you spoke. Okay.
Okay.
Now we can circle back to the agenda item that I passed over, and this is the work application for the Carnegie Library Building exterior updates, including construction of a pedestrian tunnel into the building to maintain public safety, installing copper downspouts, installing hammer seam copper flat roofs, and installing Grand Manor shingle hip and ridge. And Mike, I think we probably should turn this over to Gwen. She knows the
Please.
project in detail.
Yes, please.
And with what I submitted, I did just look for a little bit of clarification. And again, if, just hopefully no one has questions, but if they do and we wanted to ever circle back to this issue, I'm hoping these documents will help us clarify any questions we have tonight. And if not, then obviously we can work further on that. But I want to hand each of these, if you can hand a copy of each of that down. And this is by no means the entire guideline.
This one here? Oh, you brought more?
I'm sorry. I
No,
printed
that's fine.
that stuff off extra. It's
That's
not
fine.
really part of the project, but it's actually Secretary of the Interior standards
Mm-hmm.
that are on PDF online, easy to look up. But that's what I'll kind of be referring here to. And so you see in the packet what we're doing. The first few pages in your packet show, this is a write-up from Grand River Builders out of Grand Rapids, Michigan. And they're professionals in doing kind of all your heavier construction products as far as building restoration, maintenance, preservation, and do a lot of commercial projects in Grand Rapids area and elsewhere. So they're used to working with copper, slate, steel, brick, mortar, doing restoration masonry, the whole thing. So the portion of the restoration of the museum that this proposal is about is working, it's pretty much a roof replacement. But in addition to replacing the roof, so I'll go over that, but then I'll get into some official definitions for you so that we're in line with Secretary of Interior standards. So it is a roof replacement. And you say, well, how is that restoration? Well, actually, that is the definition of restoration on the packet I just handed you. That front page kind of sums it up, and I'll just read it out loud for the record here. Restoration is defined as the act or process of accurately depicting the form, features, and character of a property as appeared at a particular period of time by means of the removal of features from other periods in history and reconstruction of missing features from the restoration period. The limited and sensitive upgrading of mechanical, electrical, plumbing systems, code required work to make properties functional is appropriate within a restoration property. And again, it goes on later, as I read earlier, that you have to be very sensitive as to how you do that. And sometimes the answer is simply no. You know, depending on what your building is and the significance. And this building is kind of comparably significant in that it's a National Registered Site. It's a Historic State Registered Site as well, as is the building we just spoke about, the Cobbs and Mitchell building. The difference that we have here in this Carnegie Library, which makes it pretty special, is you had almost 1,700 Carnegie Libraries made in the U.S., more of that overseas, but just a few extra hundred. So almost 1,700 made in the U.S. Of those, we have, I think, 158 still existing of the Carnegie Libraries in the United States. This is literally the only Carnegie Library made in a hexagonal shape. So, yeah, isn't that cool? Yeah, so there are definitely the common features of Carnegie displayed in the building, which I'm not getting into, you know, what I think of the building per se, because this is an app just basically to redo the roof. So if you flip through your packet, but it's a very significant, important building, so obviously we want to do like for like. So when you, on the packet I just handed you, you have, past the first page, you have definitions of preservation versus rehabilitation versus restoration and reconstruction. So obviously we know this stuff, but sometimes if you haven't just read it, it's not particularly fresh in your mind. But our project here falls under the category of restoration because it is process of accurately depicting as it appeared in a particular period of time. So we are going back literally to the origin of what this building was. So when the packet you had from Mike, when you see the picture of the building in front where it has that cover sheet, Historic Restoration Consulting Group, you're seeing what the building looks like now. So most of it's still in place. You flip another page and you've got your the layout with kind of the color-coded stuff. And that is showing you all the areas that would be touched on except for the dotted line. The dotted line is optional stuff, and that is cresting that can be stamped metal, galvanized steel that would be put up there at a later date. It's purely aesthetic. It's not about structural integrity. So this roof restoration is actually about structural integrity. So you're putting back the original product, but you're also restoring an area that, you know, has leaks and has had issues. And so on that color-coded, the shingles that are in the light blue, all of that will be a red slate material. The brown, the chimneys. So it's not just a roofing. With the roofing, you have to do your copper gutters at the same time. So new copper gutters will be fabricated and made to go under these shingles and along the roof line, as well as all the tuck pointing and relaying of masonry on the couple of chimneys that will be there. And then on the top roof lines of the building that are below the edge of all of that, there's actually quite a bit of masonry work that needs to be done. And part of that is, you may not, in the museum right now, you may not have water rushing down a wall and you see water stains on the ceiling or something, but water travels where it wants to go. So as you go further into this packet, you'll see where what people did. Oh, I'm sorry, I'll go to that next page. If you go past the color-coded page, there are also some flat roof sections that would be done in copper. And so you're dealing with copper, slate, and then redoing masonry work in the areas. And the chimneys, when they're re-bricked, would also be properly flashed with the copper flashings. So that next page is kind of labeling some of all the yucky stuff there on the ceiling, replacing flashings. But where they can, they will use existing flashings, installed hammered seam copper roof on the flat section that's sort of on the bottom right of the picture. Fabricate and install steel cornice to make all of that work there. And your steel panels reflash the base of the acanthus leaf finials. If you flip one more page, the bottom of the page says page 4. And on that, you start seeing where you get a ridge line at the edge of your roof. There's a ridge line a foot or two up, however deep the gutter system was. And the reason that ridge line is there is they would put multiple layers of shingles, like it's 3 or 4 layers of shingles up there right now, where they would just put asphalt over asphalt. So all of that is still there, but what happens is it starts sinking in where they would just cover up the old copper gutters, okay? So it just wants to sink into that area. So when you do start getting roof leaks, that's the first place it goes to, is this lower sinking area and down into the gutters. Well, why did they cover up the gutters? A, they were putting on an asphalt roof. B, the gutters were already leaking. So they were worn out gutters. So now you have the roof leaking slowly into the old gutter system that's there. But that's where the gutter system is now wicking fluid. Wicking fluid. I just came from the office. Sorry, medical office. Wicking water down behind the 2 walls. So that's where you get your the damage to the mortar work that's below, is from that sagging area on the roof, that when that comes off and is done properly, that ends up being where your copper gutter will reside. And then you keep flipping a little more, page 6, you start seeing where that is a galvanized steel, as far as I know. All of that trim work that looks kind of like a crown molding is galvanized steel. Well, I think galvanized has about an 80-year life, from what I'm told. So then it does eventually start rusting, and this is all original, so that's why you have some rust marks and cracks and whatnot. But as far as structural integrity, I've been told that most of that is still acceptable for reuse. So we are not looking at replacing any of that white, what looks like white crown molding type ornamentation on top. They will literally take that off the top of the building, and then they will tuck point the brick underneath it and make sure everything is sound above the windows, because that's part of the issue. Are these walls up in here, it's just kind of easier to point. In this area here and here, the walls want to buckle out a little bit, because you have a double layer of walls, so the water's going between, and those walls want to buckle out. So I'm not sure if they will stabilize them in place or if they'll actually bring them back in. You know, they'll do that according to what condition they find when they open it all up. But they're basically tuck pointing probably down to the top of those arched windows, and or relaying brick until it's shored up, and then they'll rebuild their roof line and their gutters, and at the end they'll put all of that metal trim work will go back up. So page 7 just shows what an old rotted gutter looks like on the left, and how they rebuild the structure underneath. And those wood blocks, those are up against the back of what looks like your crown molding. That looks, you know, aesthetically pleasing from the street. And then they fabricate the copper to go on the inside of that little framework there.
Oh, nice.
So you don't actually see the gutter from the ground, and you might see some of it, but depending on how far away you are. But generally, you're mostly seeing that crown element that we're reusing. So over time, that could be, some of that stuff is in bad shape. You know, a lot of it's in bad shape. It needs TLC for sure, but that's not like the structural issue right now. It's just the roof. All takes money, so one thing at a time. So the next page is just showing you new soldered copper. And then the architectural sheet metal on page 8 is just showing you what the elements look like close up. So there, you can see they're in pretty rough shape. They need to be cleaned up and painted and that kind of thing, but that will come further down the road as more donor dollars are coming in. And that is the gist of that. Let me see here if there's anything really separate as far as being relevant. It's really just that we're in the category of restoration versus preservation. Or rehabilitation. I mean, the building has been rehabilitated, in that the definition of that is using it for an alternate, you know, an alternate compatible use that's going to work in the building. Well, clearly we've been a museum for years, so that's already happened as far as that sort of transition. But this part of the project is really, part of it is preservation, the masonry work, and then most of it, this phase of the job, is restoration, because you are replacing what is gone or needs to be replaced, which is the gutter system, and all the roofing portion there. So that's the gist of it. Does anybody have questions?
I have one. Just on the first page here, just was curious, the number 4, building a pedestrian tunnel. Where exactly is that? The back of the building?
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask.
Into the building, maintain safe public access. Where it will be is, let's see, have you turned?
And is that a part of like the first phase, or is that a part of a later
Oh yeah,
phase?
they'll do that. Basically, so the building is still functional. It'll be on the, I'll say if you're facing the building, the right-hand side. It's outside this door right here. This is the current entrance
Oh,
to the
okay.
museum.
Okay.
So they will make sure that this is a safe entryway where while they're working above that, there's nothing that can be falling down on pedestrians or anything like that during.
That's temporary then? Not
Oh yes, that's temporary.
I read that.
now
I was like, what is she building on there?
Skywalk. No.
I was
No,
like,
that's-
there's a tunnel into there?
Now I get it.
So it's just a safety measure. No, they put it up and then they take it down.
That I understand.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I build a pedestrian tunnel and I'm,
Yeah.
That was my
Like,
question.
what in the world are they doing? Yeah. So I've seen their work. They do excellent work. They did a church in Cedar. They put a brand new cedar roof on that entire church and did a beautiful job. And they did redo our carriage house at the Mitchell House. They did about half of that, where they relayed two sides of the actual carriage door entrances. And they were good at working with the fact that it was, that was not a restoration, that was more like a preservation, because we replaced a few shingles, but that was really, just a maintenance, but it's like for like, you're taking tile off and they fix any leaks and underlayment, so you're getting all new product underneath, whether it's the support structures, if anything's rotted out, they're very, they make sure everything is structurally sound and safe, and then they cover all of that back over with new waterproof material, and then they relay your shingles. So they did a beautiful job. They did construct or fabricate a good amount of gutter length on that whole, what would that be? Well, it's inside the driving parking lot area there, but they do nice work.
And I have no doubt that they say once the roof is completely opened up at the eave, they will present a plan for adding attic ventilation if possible. So that shouldn't be a
Yeah.
problem.
Shouldn't be.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
Wonderful. That's
When
wonderful.
the flat roof
yeah, it'll be
area,
exciting. Yes.
Mhm.
how is that drained? Does that have a
I have
slope
no
and
idea.
it's drained?
I think they have a slight slope to it,
Okay.
is the
Drained
impression
to
they
the
gave me.
gutters?
Yeah, I mean, everything right here, well, if you kind of look here, these are the two areas that are, because they're decorative basically. But I think he kind of described doing, like on the back of a chimney, how you have the little V thing. And that is the impression I get on what they're doing on those areas there to drain stuff off.
So the-
Or maybe they're sloped at a slight angle, because I don't remember if he said, I know he said that on the chimneys. Let me just look at the. Yeah, that's something I would clarify with him actually, because I'm not completely 100% positive what he said. If they're just because they definitely put new steel panels, but then the hammered seam copper is just basically wrapping and casing it. So they're basically rebuilding what is there, but it was brought up to me, and they did that on the copper dome as well, where they had they looked beautiful, these very sharp 90-degree angle stepping elements around the dome. But I think they actually ended up changing that slightly when they did the dome to give it a slight, downward pitch so the water would run off. Yeah.
Right.
So I get the impression that's what they're doing with that. But if you want clarification, I can certainly
Well,
ask.
I only as a comment, flat
Well,
roofs
actually, it's
aren't
something
really
I'm going to
meant
ask him
hold
about
water.
too. Yeah, yeah, because you don't want to just puddling up
Where's it
there,
go?
right?
Right.
Exactly. Yeah. So, are you all happy with this? Do you want any more explanations? Do you all want to donate money?
Both. Very happy with it.
It looks exciting.
Yeah.
So I will hold back and not vote on that because I'm on their board. So I'll let you guys do whatever you think.
That is great work.
Do I have a motion to approve the application for the former Carnegie Library to perform the work that is set forth in detail in the application and the attachments?
I'll second.
Oh, there you go.
Second, or whichever.
So who made the motion?
Pat,
Okay, and
I'm just guessing
Mark,
Pat
second?
spoke.
Okay, yes.
Okay.
Mark, so.
And then Mike, did you
Roll
want to
call?
do a roll call?
Yes, definitely. Bertles,
Yes.
Carter,
Yes.
Engels,
Yes.
Dubravik,
Abstain.
yep, Snyder.
Yes.
Looks like it's a go.
Okay, very exciting.
That was wonderful.
So I'm serious about the donations here, people.
Yeah, we will.
That was a good hard sell to Tom over there.
Yeah, Tom, come on.
I'm just glad you waited until after.
I wonder if we would have asked for the donation if we had said no.
Oh, no, I wouldn't have. Not have gone there.
Okay, so next item under new business is something that arises out of the whole issue with the Cobbs and Mitchell building. It's discuss and clarify staff responsibilities vis-a-vis the HDC regarding work on resources within the city's historic districts. So
Let me just real quick, I can clarify real quick. I put together bullets showing specifically, well, let me just, if I might, real quick. Essentially, when I came to work for the city of Cadillac, the HDC falls under the community development section of our ordinance, chapter 12. I'm a zoning administrator, so the work I do is actually in chapter 46. But the community development director at the time, because of how busy he was, he instructed me to, number one, I had to learn enough to be able to answer questions from residents, the public, and realtors. He asked me to process submitted work applications, ones that require HDC review. I notify you as soon as we get an application, write the staff report, and include all the supporting documents like you see. I'm also instructed, obviously, to set up chambers to, present and to then lock up City Hall afterwards. And the last two items that fall under my responsibilities with respect to this is I am instructed to prepare the meeting minutes and then, of course, prepare the required annual report. And as I was instructed when I came to work for the city, that is my responsibilities.
right, and so maybe this would have been a good time to have John here, because I understand that you have designated responsibilities that are part of your protocol, but what's happening is that there's obviously work going on in the district that and permits being issued that aren't being brought to HDC's attention. So there has to be coordination at the city level regarding the issuance of permits, so that no permit that requires our approval, pre-approval, a certificate of appropriateness, is issued until we have issued either a certificate of appropriateness or a notice to proceed. And obviously, we had issues with that twice with Cobbs and Mitchell. And I'm sure there's been dribs and drabs of issues with respect to other properties in the district. So I think rather than belaboring the issue tonight and trying to hash it out amongst us without having a discussion with you, John Wallace, whoever I need to talk to, what I think should happen is I will meet with you and or John or whoever you think I should be meeting with.
It would definitely be John, and I'm sure myself. The only thing I would ask is just make sure, understanding, and I will email you this, what I just sent you, or what I just showed you. But certainly, write down your expectations, and if there are expectations, get them to John, and then John can review it and go from there.
Right, but I think it would be helpful for us to meet so that we can develop a protocol, bring it back to HDC and say, here's what we've come up with as a procedure to make sure these sorts of things don't happen again. And then anticipating some other things that I can see could happen just because of the sort of lack of a procedure. And have the HDC adopt some very basic rules of procedure so everybody's clear on expectations.
And a big issue we get is, let's face it, there's a lot of people that start and do work on their homes, never ask permission. I mean, this is certainly not just an issue in the HDC. This is an issue throughout the city. And when the building inspectors see something, they'll slap a stop work order until they have it. Actually, last month, the roof on Cass Street that you folks approved, the building inspector had to slap a temporary stop work order on that. And I won't get into the details, but that happened. We had that with your neighbor, Angie Fairchild is it, you know, and all of a sudden contractors are putting in new windows. And of course, the only way we found out was because those of you that live in that neighborhood, Nan and that, saw it, you know, and this is an ongoing battle with people doing work without either getting building permits, just going ahead and doing things without checking, without getting building permits. And the vast majority of people that do work definitely check with the city, but it's the ones that don't that, you know, it's just an ongoing problem throughout the city. People doing work without getting appropriate permits. And it also affects things like, you know, I'd mentioned to you, the building permit process. For example, if somebody wants to put vinyl siding on their house, they don't have to get a permit. Building inspection firm, this is the type of work that they're not requiring permits. The same with windows. If you replace windows and do not expand the opening, right now, building inspector is go ahead. You don't need permits for that. Now they used to allow more flexibility with roofs, but they've really kind of cracked down on roofs. So, you know, that's just an added problem that we have, particularly with the HDC district. You know, someone might call and say, hey, I'm replacing a couple windows, do I need a permit? No. Now, they don't even have to talk to me because I'm not the building inspector. You know, the same with, you know, as I said, someone vinyl siding. So I believe it's always going to be an ongoing battle in the HDC because you do need to review it, yet they can call the building inspector and, you know, the firm and be told you can replace windows. So I see that as an ongoing issue. I don't see being able to just lock that one down.
Yeah, I understand that. I'm talking more at the level where permits are actually issued and there's not a certificate of appropriateness or notice to proceed on file.
And we can prepare those the day after the meeting. I'll get you a couple. We'll talk tomorrow.
Okay.
Yeah.
We don't need to take action on this particular item, I think, at this point.
But I
I don't think it's necessarily maybe it's a perpetual ongoing problem to have people in town understand the permit process, okay, what they need or don't need. But as far as city employees, if you call Cindy and she knows whether or not you need a permit to do a roof, she should also know, no, you don't need a permit for a window, but what is your address? This is not a very big district.
But people don't necessarily
You know.
call Cindy.
Right, no, I know, I'm just
They
using
can,
that
they
as an
can talk,
example.
you know what I'm saying.
Right,
Because
right.
what we actually try to do is give people the phone number of AGS Professional Services. Because usually one question is followed up by another, and then they start asking questions about the Michigan Building Code. You know what I'm saying? It's,
Right.
you know, those
But
are.
it's just one more rule.
Oh,
For
it's-
instance, that
it's-
anything in this district, well, even if it's
There's no question.
not needing a permit,
There's no
then
question.
anything, it's a
There's no
small area
question.
to cover.
As far as the
But it's just
certificate
a
of
layer.
appropriateness, it's something that in the past, you know, I'll fill out the name and address, but as far as the actual body of it, that's definitely something commission chairperson should look at, because oftentimes, for good reason, whether it be like the HDC or the Zoning Board of Appeals, when they approve something, it's with conditions. And you folks, for example, understand the conditions specifically versus me. But that's not a big deal. I can email a couple of templates with the name and address tomorrow morning. But it's something there's no question, we got to stay on top of it. Remember and do it. Remember and do it. Some administrative stuff like landscaping removal, tree removal, brush removal, that sort of thing. That's something that for years has just been, you know, someone's in a historic district, they got a tree that's damaging the foundation, they want to remove it. That is, quite frankly, something that I understand for years has been administratively just approved. But that's an example of, you know, that's a, you understand.
Right.
But you keep referring to the building inspector, but yet it's truly the city of Cadillacs.
Absolutely.
Says that. Is that correct?
We adhere to They basically are the consultant that the city hired.
Right. So they're going to enforce what you tell them beyond the building code. And so when does a building permit required? Used to be in Cadillac, if it exceeded $5,000. I don't know.
I see.
I don't know where they're at today. But, you know, it is Cadillac. I'm assuming they're coming to a desk out here. They're not
Sure.
going to Battle Creek, where the building inspector's from, to look at that.
Yeah.
But I think the bigger issue here is the Rob Munger process. Did he get a building permit?
For,
For the
Sorts of
Cobb
stuff.
Mitchell building?
I would say yes, he has.
And then maybe it's in the application, because on the application is the historical district listed. Have you approvals of this historical district? Are they needed?
That's a good question. You're familiar with building permit paperwork, which I'm not.
Yeah.
So that is a question then I take it that's on it.
Because any other building permit I try to pull, the building inspector won't even review it until the mechanical inspector's reviewed it.
Right.
Until, you got everybody else
Sure, sure.
ahead of the zoning inspector. And so it has to be approved first, so they have to make sure they have all those approvals. And I think if we had that on a form that they looked at, and would be solve a lot of the problems.
Pat, would you have
I
time
see what you're
to,
saying. Add it
sit
to the,
down
add it
with
to the
Mike
form.
and or John?
And I'll have to read the form
Hour,
carefully.
hour and a half and iron out some proposals?
Style that.
Because you have a knowledge of the process that I don't have. I would appreciate that input.
I'd be happy to do that.
Yeah, that would be
Yeah, that's
really good.
helpful.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think it's just a simple thing, adding it on to the permit. Most
Oh, I
of them have
agree.
that. All those pieces there, the building
Well,
inspector says, well,
the
check, check,
permit-
check. Oh, you don't have the historical.
I agree, because the permit clearly asks the question, are you in a floodplain? You know, is the location in a floodplain? So, yeah, I would, you know, to add, you know, is the address in a historic district is, you know, it's got to be a pretty easy thing to add.
Right. And I think that's the, you know, whoever they come to at the desk is, well, are you in the historic district? They've
It's a
gotta know
checklist,
that
yeah.
address is, and so remember you're in the historic district, you're gonna have to comply with that. And just so
That
they're
makes a
aware.
lot of sense.
Any other comments on that subject?
Yeah, I was just going to say, maybe it would be a simple, like a program in the computer that would just kind of flag, you know, somebody pulled a permit that property is.
Fit that
You know, just, you know,
address.
every property that's in the historic district should be, you know, maybe, because I've seen programs like that where it would flag something up for the, you know,
Just the address.
or whatever. Yeah, right. They could do it that way.
I'm gonna guess, obviously, we don't have that program at this time. I don't know what it would take to add, but, you know, but that's, I mean, it's a good example of just Cindy, when Tom submitted his application to re-roof his home. That thing would have never, ever crossed my desk. Wouldn't have to. It's got nothing to do with zoning. And Cindy caught it.
Well, I'm curious as to why that doesn't go across John Wallace's desk, though, because isn't he community development?
He is community
And
development.
technically over our umbrella, right?
Well,
'Cause
he's
it used to
over
always be
the,
Jerry
he
Adams,
is
which
clearly
is
over
now-
the HDC umbrella.
I'm
but
sorry?
He is clearly over the HDC umbrella.
Uh-huh.
You know, you've got this, you've got the Downtown Development, you know, Authority. But as far as building inspection type of stuff, John nor I get into actual building license permits, whether it be skilled trades or whatever. What we are very specifically responsible for is reviewing site plans. And generally speaking, if a person is getting, and that's one of the things that's actually on the building permit, is, you know, is zoning approval needed? And if they're not expanding the structure or changing the shape of the building, it's just automatically not applicable. Because that's the big thing we do with the site plan, is look at the setbacks, look at the height, look at these different things. And then we have to also look at, if it's a big structure, how much square footage of the property is covered with roof-type structures. So there's a whole list of things we look at. But basically, if a person wants to get a mechanical permit for each, you know, for air conditioning, an electrical permit for something, re-roof, do windows, whatever, if they're not actually changing the, I shouldn't, there are but if they're not really changing the size of the building, they're not adding on or whatever, or putting a covered porch, it's pretty much not applicable. Neither of us need to review it.
Well, you know, those applications too, it kind of speaks to, it took a long time to get a historic district established here in this community. And once we did get it established, you know, it's kind of a thing of how important is it to the town. And if we have these forms and what's important, do we need to change, you know, does this need to go before the zoning administrator? Does this need to go before the, I don't know, electrical, you know, whatever, the different, but if the historic district is literally the first thing on the list, is your address in the historic district or not?
Right.
Because there's only one area that's a historic district. And it's not that big, not that hard to figure out.
it's
But if
pretty
that's
easy
the
to check.
first thing, because many of the things they might do might not require a permit, right? That's what you're
Absolutely.
telling me.
That's what you're
So
saying,
if the stopgap starts with us, and that I think would also help long-term, almost like a free advertising, if you will, if we're gonna be on the form anyway, might as well be at the top, you know, but that starts changing the mindset to think about, oh, this is something that gets considered along with everything else, and you can't skip it, it's the top of the list,
Sure.
you know? Because you clearly, if you need to do something structural, electrical, mechanical, whatever, all that's gonna need to be going through the permit process because there's an importance to it, right? But not just being, because I could easily see it being buried in the list or at the bottom and being forgotten, because people aren't used to looking at it. But if you're at the top, you're not gonna get forgotten. So that's where
Well,
we need to be, Mike.
I don't think it's going to be at the top, Gwen, but I know that there is a spot where there is a list of our other permits needed, specifically a sign permit. You know, that's one of the things that's zoning that I review. And that is clearly a part of the building permit application is a sign permit needed. And again, if the work being done isn't a sign, it's just NA. So.
I just don't want it to get forgotten, that's all.
I just wanted to share, this is kind of a neat little historical story, but way before the district, when we were doing major restoration at the home, it was like probably 18 years ago, like 2000, I think it was. But when we were replacing all the railing, you know, the railing that's on the second floor, and, you know, I mean, everything is proportionally correct and blah, blah, blah. But it was somebody from the city who came and said, oh, you know, you have to raise that. But what they didn't realize is, I think, jurisdiction, because it was nationally registered, you know, the home, that,
The
you know,
precedence
so we had
of
to
the
take
local
that.
ordinance.
Yeah, so we, you know, it didn't become a legal matter or anything, but it just took some clarification, so it could be, you know, done the way it originally was done. It would have looked odd, I mean, if those, you know, if it was like 1.5 feet higher than what it, yeah.
Well, Pat's familiar with the history actually more than I have, because I've only worked for the city 5 years, but many, many years ago, we had our own building mechanical inspectors, etc. And then the city stopped doing it and essentially turned it over to the county. And I don't know how many years the county did it, but now it's been with AGS Professional Services, I believe about 2.5 years. And again, it's not a hired city staffer that's out doing the inspections. It's a consulting firm that, you know, we've hired, and council has made it very clear that, you know, they want this consulting firm to essentially use the most current building code, you know, rules. And I believe some of the codes I know were redone in 2015, and as we get into that, builders particularly, we've ran into that, especially with some companies that do like fire suppression systems. You know, a company in town will come and hire them to do something, and maybe the old regulations are currently in the building, and there is a certain point where certain things can be, I assume, repaired according to how it was done, but anytime you get into new construction of a building that needs fire suppression, it is the most current code, and our fire marshal he's quite frankly had to you know, tell some of these contractors you're working at risk. You know, I'm not going to tell you to stop, but when we come to do the final inspection, if it's not to the most current code, we're not going to give you an occupancy permit.
You had mentioned something about a sign that I think at the Cobbs and Mitchell, you said because of the zoning.
He put a monument sign. He needed to have a sign for Prine and Newhoff.
Yeah.
And he put a small, you know, you'll look at the sign.
Like a tasteful sign,
wrapped in,
yeah.
and I was personally, you know, I review sign permits. I was absolutely thrilled that that is what he wanted versus like a pole sign that you see across a chemical bank or a Shell gas
It's not very
station.
big.
No, it's not.
And it's on the building.
Right, and I was just thrilled when I saw the size of it and what he wanted to do, because, you know, the sign ordinance, it's restrictive in some ways, but I personally think there's a lot of ugly signage.
Well, even that
Yeah,
sign
there
is
are, yeah.
governed by the, that's under SHPO's.
I was going to ask about that now
Yeah.
next. So isn't there, like,
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
sure there's some law or rules about that.
Did the drive-by
Yep.
looking at him, I was like, and there's the sign. I'm just like, okay, so we're gonna do this. We're gonna make a note of every little thing different. And I was like, and there's the sign, so we'll see what they had to say about that too. Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so, old business, there is none. Tabled items, none. Informational items, none. Any commissioner comments? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I have a comment.
Oh,
I don't know whether I should issue this, but I will. Why did we have the city attorney and
Because
Mr.
Marcus asked him to come.
here today, and they didn't stay for the whole meeting? So to me,
It
came down to only the Cobbs Mitchell building,
I would agree.
all right?
I would agree.
And that I sense from past experience working with the city for 50 years. We may have some opposition within the city to our group.
oh, yeah, well, I guess you've just put out into the open what the undercurrent of opinion is, yes.
I've seen that before, and that's, I'm just,
Well, so,
we need to make special, maybe efforts to, like Quinn said, win everybody over to our side. The positiveness of the district.
We're all thrilled it's being restored, but
yeah, I mean, if we're on this subject, I mean, it's really that, and it's not just us being persnickety. I've had a lot of people comment that they think it looks terrible. The conduit, they think it looks terrible. They don't like looking at the compressors. It's not just us saying it doesn't comply with the standards. You have people in Cadillac who are proud of that building and they think it looks really bad. I'm sure everybody appreciates the fact that he's making efforts, but it's such a prominent location, and he did buy a National Register building. And so there are rights that come along with that, but there are responsibilities. And I don't think that this group wants to be or is being unreasonable. But on the other hand, we're not just shills. So I understand that everybody wants that building occupied, they want it generating income, et cetera, and so forth. So we'll just ask the property owner to meet us on issues that are pretty obvious and not really genuinely debatable. And we'd be happy, we're happy he's here, you know, happy somebody's investing in the community. But please, just be respectful is the message. Thank you.
But I just wonder if we need to be more marketing. I mean, the historical district is coming along very well. You look before it started. This is an awesome area, and it's going to, it has, I'm sure, evaluated the homes much higher in that area. And people are coming in and liking what they see around, and think they can do anything.
Well, yeah, Gwen pointed out there are several people right outside the district who are making significant and sensitive improvements to their homes, even though they're not in the district. So I think there is a more of an appreciation of the resources in our area, even outside the district. But also maybe along the lines of what we were talking about previously, some education in the community about the historic district. Maybe we should work on a I don't want to call it a flyer, maybe a flyer or some sort of
Flyer they can hand
bulletin.
out with
Yeah,
building permit application.
right.
Mhm.
Something to send to the,
Or the realtors.
The realtors.
right, yeah, something nice and glossy. Yeah. That sounds like a project for Anne.
We discussed that actually
Yeah,
many
walked
years
into
ago
it.
out to realtors.
Yeah.
You know,
But it
That
ties,
was what my degree was in, so I will take that.
Marketing?
Oh, you really?
Sort of. It was,
Okay,
it was
cool.
professional and technical writing, so I enjoy doing that.
but it ties in with a newsletter too. It's, you know, it's the same topic,
Yep.
just a different,
I've never seen one of our newsletters, so if you have one, you can send me.
I'll email you a bunch of them.
Okay, that'd be awesome.
We ran out of topics.
Yeah,
It was
you
kind of
did.
the same
I
topics-
find that hard to
kind of
believe.
the same topics being regurgitated every couple of years.
Yeah.
But there's, you know,
We'll come up with some new ones.
but
Yeah.
it's a good time of year to send one, particularly, we've got one that we did that, you know, just copy and paste a few things, but just reminding people things they can do to, you know, better prepare their roofs and their homes for winter.
Yes.
You know, now's the time to be thinking about it.
I also
not in
do
December.
insurance, and we send the same kind of things out.
So-
Winter's coming. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Please be
Never.
ready.
Well, to be quite honest, some of the stuff we have in our brochures, we have gotten off of insurance company sites. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
Any other comments? Motion to adjourn?
I'll make a
Second.
motion. There you go.
No roll call.
Quick, all right.
All right, thank you, everybody, for